I want to welcome you to our event. We're really excited to have you here to show you lots of amazing comparisons between legacy ERP or some products and the ways that they have changed and been maximized in the Sage world. So really excited. We have Sean McMahon, who has Business Development Manager in Intacct, and then Mary Beth, who is a Sage Intacct consultant and a former Sage 100 consultant, which makes her really uniquely poised to be the presenter and the demo consultant in this event. So we're really excited to be here. So the agenda will go over, DSD and just our history with the cloud, Sage 100 versus Sage Intacct, and then get into the demo where we compare and contrast, I guess, the different functionality. And then we will have this interactive Q&A session. So throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the chat box. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to address them in that portion of our webinar today. So with that, I will pass it over to Sean.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and we're really excited to be able to present this to you today. I'm excited to talk a little bit about some of the differences between Sage 100 and Sage Intacct and why it might make sense for you to consider a switch. So we're going to start off with a little bit of an overview. For those of you who don't know who DSD Business Systems is and what we're all about. DSD Business Systems as a company has been in, I think we've been going strong since 1984. And we have over 9,000 businesses served, over 5,000 custom implementations, 45 offices across North America, and over 36 years in business. We view this slide as kind of our trophy room, as if you will. Really, we're proud of the achievements that we've had, and we know that a lot of that is built on the strength of our relationships with our customers like you. And more specifically, we're here to talk about Sage. Sage came to us because of our success with Sage 100 and some of the other Sage legacy products and asked us to take a look at Intacct. And we were really excited once we had a chance to get into Sage Intacct and take a look at some of the power of the solution, some of the functionality that it contains, and really the things that we could bring to you, our clients. We're really excited to be able to share some more about that with you today. And I think it's important as we're considering and talking about Sage Intacct to really think about the cloud and why it matters. 2017 report by IBM noted that 90% of the world's data has been generated in the past 2 years, which is pretty mind-boggling if you think about the amount of data and how much data is out in the world right now. We know, especially with COVID, that remote workforces present unique problems in terms of collaboration, transparency of information, people being able to speak to each other. We know that rules and regulations shift, compliancy and reporting requirements shift constantly. We know that organizations want to minimize costs as economic hardships put pressure on the bottom line, and that's really become apparent more now lately than ever. And we know that it's also important to consider increased security because ransomware attacks are becoming more and more prevalent, and we know that more and more of our clients are getting hit with this all the time. And because of that, the cloud really makes a lot of sense because it gives you that increased security that you're not available to always get with an on-premise solution. As we're going through, a lot of times people that are, especially those that are coming from the on-premise software world, they look at the licensing and don't realize that there's a lot of hidden costs and ongoing costs that are part of what they're doing with that on-premise solution. They will only look at the licensing without taking into account how much customization and implementation comes into effect, how much time and energy and resources they're putting into their hardware, the IT personnel that goes into maintaining it, and the training that they have to do. And what they, as you look at a cloud model and what the differences are, most of the cost in that is tied up in the subscription fee, and really then you're looking at implementation, customization, and training. But a lot of the hardware costs, IT personnel costs, and all of those things that you'd formerly been paying for with an on-premise solution are really taken and moved over into subscription fee. So it's not really an apples to apples comparison, but what we're here to do today is to help you make a comparison and make it line up a little bit more. So now we want to talk a little bit about Sage 100 and Sage Intacct and how the two products compare. I think a good starting point for any conversation around the two solutions and how they compare is to talk about Sage Intacct and what it is. It is a cloud financial management solution designed for financial leaders by accountants for accountants. It's got best-in-class scalable applications. You're able to access it from anywhere on any device that has an internet browser. It's got true dimensional accounting, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that in a second. It specializes in companies that have multi-company and multi-tenant environments. It works really well with multi-currency, and it's in a multi-tenant format. It's dashboard driven, which means that there are graphical illustrations of the data that you're looking at. And you have the ability to take those graphical illustrations and drill them all the way down to the transaction level. The integrations don't break with upgrades. They've got automatic free upgrades each quarter. So any of you that are used to paying for upgrades every couple of years with Sage 100 will be pleased to know that those upgrades roll out 4 times a year, and they will not break anything when those upgrades roll through. And so that also needs to be factored in the cost when you're considering a comparison between 100 and Intacct. It is the AICPA endorsed #1 customer satisfaction solution, and there's an ongoing customer community building around Intacct. And so, we talked about the DSD trophy room earlier. This is the Sage Intacct trophy room, and it's continuing to grow every year. So now we want to talk a little bit about Sage 100 and Sage Intacct and do a comparison. When you're looking at Sage 100, it is really an on-premise solution first and foremost. It is it can be hosted in a third party, but realistically, one way or another, your information is residing on a server that either you or your hosting company controls. Whereas opposed to Sage Intacct, which is a 100% cloud-based financial management solution that is in a multi-tenant environment. The user licenses are different. Sage 100 licenses are concurrent, whereas Sage Intacct, they are named. They both are available as a subscription. The updates come out biannually with Sage 100, where they're released quarterly with Sage Intacct. And once again, those quarterly updates roll out automatically without any intervention on your side. The ease of upgrade, it's a little bit different with 100. You do need some assistance, generally speaking, in order to be able to do an upgrade, whereas once again, those roll out automatically with Sage Intacct. The programming language on the back end, it's a ProvideX and SQL interface on Sage 100, whereas Intacct is using Linux, Apache, Oracle, and PHP in combination in order to deliver the solution. You access Sage 100 via your client server or remote desktop connection, whereas you will interface with Sage Intacct in a web browser. Workflow approval is available as an add-on with 100, where that's built into the product with Sage Intacct. The process flows are an add-on, once again, with Sage 100, whereas, once again, those are included with Sage Intacct built into the core product. And the import capabilities, your use Visual Integrator or scripts with Sage 100, whereas opposed with Intacct, it's an import template where you can use anything that you're bringing in via CSV, Excel, or XML. So as we go on, we also want to talk about the general ledger, because there is a core difference in how the two products treat that chart of accounts and the general ledger in itself. General ledger in chart of accounts in Sage 100 is going to be a traditional GL string, where that uses that natural and then segments to denote where that account lives. Sage Intacct treats a little bit different. You do still have the naturals, but it uses what's called dimensions. And we'll break into what that is and why that's so important in a little bit when Mary Beth starts to present. They both have the ability to do multi-company and multi-entity, although it does treat it a little bit differently. And once again, Mary Beth will be able to illustrate the difference. But really what you want to take away from that is that instead of having to log out and log in to the different companies or different entities that you're dealing with within your implementation, you're able to roll in and out of those very naturally with Sage Intacct. Intercompany is an add-on with Sage 100, where that's just something that is built into Sage Intacct. Same with multi-currency and multi-book. The Sage Intelligence and the reporting that you're able to pull out of that, it's absolutely something that's you're available with Sage 100, but it is kind of built into the product with Sage Intacct, and so it's a very natural way that it handles that. Budgeting is something that is available with Sage 100, but it's treated a little bit differently with Sage Intacct. And then forecasting and versioning, there's a basic version of it, but that is all built into Sage Intacct as well. As we're going through and looking at some of the other things that are available, contract billing, ASC 606, not necessarily available in Sage 100. You need to be a little bit creative when you want to handle that, whereas something that's built into Sage Intacct, revenue recognition as well. Time and attendance, these are all things that are available in Sage 100, but Intacct handles them a little bit more naturally. We talk about distribution and kitting. Those are things that are available with both. Lot tracking and serialization is available with both, but that is handled a little bit differently in Intacct. When we talk about the industries that are available to work with, manufacturing is absolutely something that you are capable of dealing with in 100. It's not a strength of the Sage Intacct solution. So, whereas it's not handled as naturally within Intacct. Job shops and light assembly, project service, SAS, and NFP. Those are the optimal industries for something like Sage Intacct. Field service is something that can be handled in Sage 100. It is available with Sage Intacct, but it usually requires some sort of third-party add-on as well as MRP. There's some key add-ons that are available in terms of CRM. That is something that would be handled with Sage CRM, whereas Intacct, because it's built on the Force.com platform, it handles that a little bit more naturally, and there is a pre-built API integration with Salesforce. Both of them are capable of working with Avalara. There are slight differences in terms of how warehouse management would be handled, whereas Scanco and Scanforce are kind of the go-to solutions for warehouse management for 100. Scanforce is still available. There is a way to work with Scanco in Intacct, but we also have the ability to work with a company called QStock that is a very powerful solution for warehouse management services. In terms of e-commerce, ROI, website pipeline are kind of standards for Sage 100. There's a whole galaxy of different e-commerce add-ons that are available with Intacct, and so if that's something you're interested in, certainly happy to have that conversation with you. AICPA endorsement is not currently available with Sage 100. That might be something they work on in the future, but we do know that Intacct comes pre-built as the #1 endorsed solution for AICPA. And so, if you're talking about, or if you're thinking about whether or not Intacct might be a good fit for you, we look at some of the industries that we know work really well with Sage Intacct. And we mentioned that, for manufacturing, it may not be a natural fit for companies that are in the CPA industry or in that realm. The healthcare industry, professional services, nonprofits, definitely. Wholesale distribution, hospitality, subscription models, construction, financial services, franchises, all of these play really well with Sage Intacct. And if you're in any of these industries, we'd love to have a conversation with you about how it might be a good fit. And as we mentioned before, the AICPA prefers Sage Intacct. It is the first and only preferred provider of accounting applications by the AICPA. And a lot of that centers around the audit trail. The audit trail is extremely important. Any of you that have ever gone through an audit know that the last thing you want is something where it may raise a question with those auditors, or you may have to go back and do some research to figure out why something was done or why a specific change was made. With Sage Intacct, we already know that audit trail is built in. They'd be able to see the information, and you have the ability to log any changes that you're making as you make them, and somebody would be able to go back and logically be able to figure out why that change was made, and you wouldn't have to answer any questions around it. So we did want to share a brief customer success story, somebody that moved from Sage 100 to Sage Intacct. We're talking about Mobscene. They are a 140 employee creative agency that does marketing, trailers, creative content, digital and social campaigns, original program, motion graphics for movies, TV shows, streaming services, and brands. By moving from Sage 100 to Sage Intacct, they were able to reduce their accounting administrative burden by 50%. They were able to embrace self-service reporting. Any of you that have ever worked as a controller or somebody that produces reports and had to answer questions from somebody else on those, Really, the power of self-service reporting, where somebody can go and get answers for themselves, could save you a ton of time. And really, by enabling that self-service reporting, they were able to avoid over $200,000 in consulting costs. They were also able to shorten their month-end close by 60%. They're able to drop their cash forecasting variance to 3%. So, we're happy to share this information out with you. I'm happy to provide you this case study so you can read through it a little more in a little bit depth. But we really thought that that was a powerful story, and we wanted to be able to share that with you as we talk about why you might consider moving to Sage Intacct. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth, and Mary Beth is going to show you a little bit about the dimensions and reports. And so, Mary Beth, it is all yours now.
Hi, everyone. I am really very excited to talk to you about the differences between Sage 100 and Intacct. As Sean was saying,
Mary Beth, you're not exactly presenting just yet.
okay. Hold on. I don't know why.
That's okay. So you have control, but you're not sharing.
Okay, here we go.
Yep, so we can see your desktop now. Perfect.
Okay. So what I was about to say was that I'm very excited to talk to you today about Intacct and dimensions and reporting. No conversation about Sage Intacct would be complete without talking about dimensions, right? Dimensions are what tell the story of the data, and it's what we use to slice and dice the data so we can get to the deeper analysis. Sometimes I feel like that's one of the biggest problems with Sage 100. Dimensions are built into the reporting tools, giving you the power to group, sort, filter, and expand data visually. Sage Intacct dimensions offer an entirely new way to track and report on financial and operational data while simplifying your chart of accounts. And I'm going to talk to that and show you that in a minute. In similar reporting systems, it's all about the chart of accounts, but in Intacct, the general ledger account is one of many dimensions, each just as important, and each used to tell the story about the data. So by using the dimensions that are personalized to your business, you can streamline your reporting processes and access the information you need across your companies and business units. With this visibility, you can quickly access the insights you need to make decisions on behalf of the company and help drive your growth. So, what does that mean? In Intacct, you can see right here, and I'm going to show you this in a minute, we have these very flexible reports and dashboards that give you more information and more accurate information in a timely manner. You can slice and dice that data, you can keep that lean chart of accounts, and you can really get in and analyze that data, which is really, really important to help you grow your business. You can tailor those dimensions to meet your business needs, and they also change as your business evolves. We can go ahead and make modifications and additions to them to help you. So there are multiple points of accessibility for the reports. Okay, so we have the dashboards, we have a report center, and we also have subledger reports. Just like we have in Sage 100, we do have all those subledger reports too. All our data is in real time. We do not have posting journals and daily transaction registers anymore. We get rid of all of that. So all of our data is in real time. We're not waiting for your accounts payable person to post their particular batch, or somebody who's doing invoices is in the middle of their batch and it's not updated. We don't have that. We have real time data. It's easy to create reports in the system. You can modify them quickly also if you need to pivot quickly. We have self-service reporting dashboards, which I'm going to show you in a little bit, which frees up your finance people so they don't have to be answering questions from, your department managers about where they are, where they stand with their budget, or any other information that they might need from the system. And we have task-centered reporting on the accounting processes. So what are the big differences? Sean touched on this a little bit. The segmented chart of accounts in Sage 100, as we all know, can make your chart of accounts huge, right? Right before I left the Sage 100 world to go to the Intacct world, I was doing an implementation for a not-for-profit who had multiple locations and multiple departments. And every time I added a new main general ledger account, I had to add 179 general ledger accounts to account for all the different segments that they needed to create and keep track of. Go on in Sage Intacct. In Sage 100, the reporting is often labor intensive. I know a lot of people find Sage Intelligence to be a little scary. You also sometimes you need a data warehouse to hold all that data, and you have these manual error-prone reports that you're taking out into Excel and manipulating. In Intacct, we don't have that. We have just our natural general ledger account with all our dimensions. We have these great dashboards where you can put your reports on there. The general ledger is our data warehouse. All the information's posting into there, and then we're using that to grab it out. We have consistent charts of accounts through all our entities. And I'm going to show you that in a minute, how we work at the top, and then we go into all the different entities. You have the ability to quickly and easily slice and dice that data. And like I said before, our reports are in real time. Okay, so what is the benefit of that modern chart of accounts? The reduced complexity, the easier slicing and dicing of that data, the insightful dimensional analysis that we're going to get, and the visibility across all of your operations. All right, so this is an example, and we don't have to beat this to death, but this is an example of what happens when you need to add multiple segments for one general ledger account, right? If we have locations and departments and projects as part of our segment, as we're adding them, the chart of accounts just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. In Intacct, we don't have that. We have, I know that this looks like Simon, but what we have is we have our standard dimensions, and then we have user-defined ones, and we have some specialty ones. And what we're doing is we're segmenting everything as we post it by that. So what can we get? We can get all that information out. So if I want to know what the revenue was for my different departments, I just run a revenue by department and it comes right out. These are the different types of dimensions that we have. Like I said, we have our standard, which is your locations, your departments, class. If we don't need to use class for class, we actually make that another user-defined dimension. We have the vendors and the customers are also dimensional so that we can report on them. Our employees are dimensions, so we can report on those too, and items. Then we have user-defined ones, which can be just about anything. We have our specialty ones, which are our projects, our warehouses, and our contracts. And then we have ones that are dependent, like our task and cost code are dependent on the project or the contract, and the cost type is dependent upon the items. All right, so now I am going to bring my Intacct over, and I'm going to show it to you. You can see that, right, guys? Okay, so this is Intacct. I'm in my browser, and I'm sitting at the main window of Intacct right now. Okay, you can see what I wanted you to see is that when I come in here, it's telling me coming soon, 2021, release 3. And what does that mean? That means tomorrow night when I log off, I will be in this version. Monday morning when I log back on, I will be in the new version. So if I click on this, it's going to give me the release notes, and it's going to talk to me and show me all the different new things that are coming out, the new functionality. Everyone in Intacct is always on the same version, all at the same time. There's a complicated rollout that will happen in the middle of the night, Friday night, to get us all on the same version. But when we all come in on Monday, this is where we will be. We'll be on the new version. Okay, so what is going on here? Okay, so this is one of my dashboards. Okay, this is my controller dashboard, and you can see I've got a whole bunch of different reports on my dashboard. They're coming from as we're posting information into Intacct, right? So let me just go over here and show you a journal entry first. I don't know what happened to it, but we'll just bring it up. Okay, these are my journal entries. Okay, this is an example of a journal entry that I've posted. I just wanted to show you how this works, right? So when I'm entering any piece of data into Intacct, whether it's coming from accounts payable, sales order, accounts receivable, doesn't matter. I'm tagging all my dimensions. So this journal entry, I'm tagging my location, my department, my class, my customer, my project, my task, my item, and my general ledger account. And you can see my general ledger account is now a 5-digit account. And I have the ability to mix and match all these different dimensions as I'm coding my data, which gives me these rich reports, right? So in Intacct, what we have is we have levels, right? You can see right here that I'm on the top level, which means that I am sitting above all of my entities and I'm transacting up at that level. That's how we get that multi-entity ability to post and to run all kinds of information and transactions at that top level. If I click over here, you can see I have a bunch of different entities. I am going to just stay up at the top here so I can show you some reports. On my dashboard, I have the ability to filter by date. I can filter by department. I can filter by my locations. And if I hit apply, my data refreshes. So if I want to see information for a particular department or a particular location or a particular, I gotta do this or my things aren't gonna be right, but I can go ahead and slice and dice that data however I want so that I can get the information that I want to see. On my dashboard, I have scorecards. You can see these up here. So my G&A expenses this month are 99.02% of budget. Well, what is that number? Where did that come from? If I click on it, I get my underlying general ledger report, right? And maybe I want to know, well, what makes up the office supplies, okay, in the actual. So I can go ahead and click on that and drill down. Here's my general ledger report. This is the posting journals. And then I can go ahead and click again. And here's the actual journal entry that posted that transaction. So anywhere in Intacct where you see something that's blue, like see when I bring my cursor up here, it's blue, that means that I can drill down onto it. So I have that real-time insight into my numbers at all times. I don't have to go ahead and go into the general ledger and run a general ledger detail report and look at it, and then maybe I don't know where that transaction came from, and maybe I have to go into paperless and I've got to go look at that accounts payable journal. What was on that accounts payable posting journal? What were the transactions that made that up? Or what was on that sales order posting journal? All of it's right here, so I can see it in real time. Okay, so this is some examples of some reports that you can do that use those dimensions, right? So this is revenue by my different areas, and I've got it in a pie. If I hover over it, you can see it gives me the numbers, and I could drill down into it. This is my revenue by dimension report. I'm just going to pop this out really quick so you can see. This is an example of what I can do with dimension. This is the same data, but it's all different dimensions, right? I've got revenue by my departments. I've got revenue by my regions. I've got revenue by my locations. I've got revenue by my customers. I've got revenue by my customer type, and I've got revenue by my items. Okay, one report, same data, just I'm using my dimensions to filter and sort so that I can get that insight into the data that I want. If I come down here, I've got a sales by salesperson report, and I've got this on another dashboard too, just showing my salespeople and what their sales were for that period. I come down here, I've got my cash balance trend report. I've got some financial ratios. And then I'm going to come back up here to the other side. Here's my cash balances. So this allows me to do a bunch of stuff, right? I see what my AP balance is, my accounts receivable balance, my cash on hand, my cash balance is here by account. What I am able to do is see that all in one place, right? When I was the controller of a publishing company here in Connecticut where I live, what I had to do was I had to go into my Sage system. I had to figure out what my cash balance was. Then I had to go to my bank, had to figure out what the bank balance was. Then I had to run an accounts receivable aged invoice report, figure out what my AR was, and do the same thing with my AP, see what my AP was. I have it all right here in one place. I also have bank feeds going on this particular version of Intacct, which is a wonderful thing where it's going out to the bank and it's pulling my transactions in. So I know that my cash balances are up to date. I also have the ability to have a budget in here. So I've got my profit and loss actual versus budget. And I could go ahead and drill down in it. You can see I've got a lot of green in here. I've got some information about my employee benefits, and I've got an expense summary by department. This is just a standard report that comes out of Intacct. I didn't have to do anything. I just ran it and put it onto my dashboard. So, dimensions. This dashboard is just illustrating what I'm doing with dimensions in this particular demo version of Intacct, right? So I've got my items. I've got different kinds of items here. Here are my different locations, my different departments that I have. I'm using class as my service lines. I've got projects in here, my different employees. Okay, and I've got a dimension report by vendor and a dimension report by my customers. So if I go ahead and click on this and bring this out, this is just showing me for the month information about my particular customers. So there are relationships that we can create with these dimensions, right? So we can say, okay, for example, if I am working with, I'm going to go over here and click on this for a second. If I'm working with a particular group of vendors, they are only for entity 100. Or if I'm working with certain items, they are only for entity 200. I can relate the dimensions between each other if I want to. So that's kind of an interesting thing that we can do with Intacct and the general ledger. We can also lock down our general ledger accounts. So for example, accounts payable and accounts receivable. I've spent a lot of consulting hours helping people who are having problems tying out their subledger to their general ledger, only to find out that someone made a journal entry into accounts receivable or accounts payable or into inventory. What we can do with Intacct is we can lock those particular general ledger accounts down so that you cannot post from a subledger into those accounts. It makes it very nice when you're trying to tie out and do month end. Okay, so reports. More about reports. So I'm going to age myself right now, but you already saw a slide that showed how long I've been a Sage 100 consultant. So first there was FRX, then there was F9, two reporting tools that we were using to enable Sage 100 users to create financial reports that they really, really needed in order to be able to run their business. Then Sage came out with Sage Intelligence, which takes the best of FRX and F9 and enables users to create financial reports. But like I said before, a lot of users find it difficult and overwhelming to use. Plus, there's that strict licensing rule with the product, which means it's hard to access it because it sits on that Sage 100 menu, but it's actually an external program running outside of Sage 100. And it allows you to report on things that are not standard in Sage 100, like consolidated financial statements, which are native in Sage Intacct. But it uses the power of Excel. So users are right back to using Excel to get their reports that they need from their accounting system, right? So like we said before, Sage Intacct is built for accountants by accountants. And what does that mean? I mean, everybody knows that data is a key to decision making, and we're capturing it all day long. Now that we have the data, what do we do with it, and how do we use it, and how do we keep track of it? So instead of taking hours to make sense, Sage Intacct was built with all of that stuff in mind, so that companies that have data in multiple spreadsheets tied to manual processes are just not readily available. These data-driven decisions that transform an organization are right here on your dashboards and in your reports. So let me show you a couple more things. If you have any questions about anything that I'm doing, just put it in the chat, and I'll stop and I'll show it. If you want to see a report or anything, just let me know. So this is my CFO dashboard. I know that this is busy, right? And in the real world, we probably wouldn't have all this stuff on this, we wouldn't be looking at this every day. But it just illustrates the power of the reports and then these dashboards that I pull the reports and the metrics onto, right? I've got my company performance up here. That would be important to me. I've got revenue for my services, revenue for the total. I've got it for the month. Comparing to the prior month, I could compare it to the budget if I wanted to. Here I am showing my product revenue. I've got my labor costs and my chargeability, my operating expenses, my operating margin. For people who like pretty reports and graphs, we've got that too. I've got EBITDA, EBITDA margin, EBITDA trend. I've got working capital, cash on hand, net income, profit margin. I've got all kinds of stuff. This is all out of the box with Intacct. If I wanted to see any of it, I could just click on it and drill down into it. And here's my direct and indirect labor trend report. I could just even click in here and see what makes up this professional development number. If I wanted to see the operating expenses for services, I would just click on it. Here it comes. And I can just drill into it. So I don't know, what makes up marketing and advertising? Here we go. I can see it all in real time. So I briefly touched upon self-service reporting, which I think is huge. And why do I think it's huge? Here's my self-service reporting. I think it's huge because I worked right before I became a Sage 100 consultant. I was a Sage 100 user, or Mass 90 and Mass 200 user, and I worked in a health system here in Connecticut as an accounting manager, and oftentimes the department heads would come to me and ask me stuff like, how am I doing compared to my budget? Or, you know, what's my expense for this line item for the year or for the month or for the quarter or whatever. And I'd have to stop what I was doing and I'd have to go ahead and run a report. With Intacct, I don't have to do that. I can give my department heads a special kind of a user that, you know, it's kind of a like look but don't touch sort of a thing, and we can lock down their security however we want. We can give them access to a dashboard similar to this that would show them information about their department. This I created for my sales managers, just showing revenue for the current month versus the budget compared to the prior month, and our travel expenses compared to the prior month. I've got that revenue report I showed you before where I'm showing the revenue by all these different things. But then I'm doing sales by salesperson. And I come down here and I'm like, okay, what are my billings by my customer? What is my revenue by my services? Here's my P&L actual versus budget for that sales department. So my actual, my budget, my difference, my variance, so that that department head can see that. They don't have to ask me for that piece of information. I already have it on this dashboard if they wanted to know about it. If they have a problem with it, then, you know, we can discuss it, but it's right there for them. And then expenses by our salespeople. So very powerful information that we can give our department head. I also have this one over here, which is another departmental dashboard. This one is for my administration department, but if I wanted to change it, maybe I want to see it from my marketing department, I just hit apply. And here's the information for that department. These dashboards can also be printed. So if you don't want to give somebody access to the system, but you want them to see all this stuff, you can actually print it out too. So just to show you a little more about Intacct, and then I'll stop talking, but I'm just going to go into accounts payable. This is my accounts payable module, right? That's what we call it in Sage 100. We call it the module. Over here, I have different reports. So I have my AP ledger. I have open items. I have recurring. I have bills analysis. I have registers. So, and I have, of course, my aging. So just like in Sage 100, on the sub ledgers, we do have a whole bunch of reports. Same thing with the general ledger. We have a bunch of reports. The difference between the general ledger and in Intacct and in Sage 100 is we don't go into the general ledger account and then start looking at transactions through that general ledger account, right? We don't open up a general ledger account and see a bunch of tabs and we can go and look and stuff. It's all within the reports because the reports have the ability to drill down. So that's a little bit of a difference. And I'm just going to show you my chart real quick. This is my chart of accounts. Very clean, very easy, very simple. That is my chart of accounts. Okay, so does anyone have any questions? Because I'm pretty much done. with what I wanted to show you for today. I do have some exciting topics that Sean and I are working on for future webinars. One of them is consolidations. I'm super excited to talk about that.
Yeah, perfect. So what I have early on in the chat, there was a question. It is, does e-commerce include AP, ACH payments?
We have the ability to do ACH payments within the system.
Okay, great. So another came through, was just, I guess, curious about your story, Mary Beth. It is, why did you move to Sage Intacct?
I get asked that a lot because, you know, people say, why didn't you just like ride out your retirement doing Sage 100? Because in Connecticut, you know, I have a bit of a reputation as a Sage 100 consultant. But I am not only certified in Sage 100 and in Intacct, I'm also certified in a product that no one's really heard about that's called Sage 1. And Sage 1 is a cloud-based ERP that was that Sage adopted, that was in the QuickBooks space. Because many years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, I kept saying we have to go to the cloud. The cloud is where it's at. We have to go to the cloud. So when Sage 1 really didn't work out, I really, really wanted to go to the cloud. I really wanted to go to Intacct for a lot of the reasons that I just said. And so I left the Sage 100 world and I took a job as an Intacct consultant, and I'm very, very glad that I did. I really feel like this is the future of accounting. And I love location independence, is what my sister-in-law calls it, where I can work from anywhere, just as long as I have an internet connection. So.
It's a Cinderella story, I think, moving over to something so powerful for your future. It's great. So one of the additional questions came through. It says, I don't see anywhere to set up the account groups as in Sage 100. Can you explain?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. The attendee says, I don't see anywhere to set up the account groups as you can in Sage 100. Can you explain?
Okay. In Intacct, we do a couple of different things, right? So I'm just going to open up a P&L account here real quick so you can see. We have what we call the quick start templates in Intacct, and we pick depending on if you're a not-for-profit or what industry you're in. And then we get what we call quick start categories. So this one is cost of sales, so it goes in the cost of sales revenue category. What that enables Intacct to do, that tells Intacct where to put it in the out of the box canned Intacct reports, right? So every general ledger account is given a category, and then that's how we populate the standard Intacct reports. When we're writing reports though, I'm going to go in and I'm going to go into my report center. I can create different account groups and I can put them on the different reports, and maybe I'll just show you that real quick. So what I can do, these are out of the box. A lot of these are out of the box account groups. And let me just pick one here. Cash and cash equivalents. If I view that and I click on hierarchy, okay, these are my general ledger accounts that are going in that group. When I create a report and I want cash and cash equivalents, I just take this particular group. Okay, and then here, let me get to a report. Go over to this dashboard here. When I want to put something onto a report, let me just click it. This is the report. This is reporting within Intacct. This is a standard financial report. If I go to the rows, in Intacct, I can decide whether I'm going to report on dimensions or general ledger accounts when I create the report. This is taking this account group, cash and cash equivalents, and putting that onto the report for me. I then have the ability to play with my columns. What I want to see, do I want to see actual? Do I want to see budget? Do I want to see this prior period? Do I want to see current period, fiscal year, all kinds of stuff. So this is much easier to understand and learn than some of the other reporting tools. We use this for financial reporting. I hope that answered your question.
Yep, let us know if we should elaborate on that. Another question came through. What is the conversion process from Sage 100 to Intacct with regard to the GL account?
So with regard to the general ledger account, if you have a segmented chart of accounts and you're reporting on different segments in that account number, what we do is we go through a process where we kind of pick it apart and we create our different dimensions off of that. And then we create what we call a mapping table, which is, if I see this general ledger account in Sage 100, then I am going to post it to this general ledger account in Intacct with this dimension, this dimension, this dimension, and this dimension. So we create a little table and then we run the data against it and we bring it right into the general ledger.
Sounds simple. Another came through. I want to make sure we can get to it. Does Sage Intacct have the ability to upload Excel data directly into Sage General Ledger?
So what we have in Intacct is we have templates. Okay, so we don't use Visual Integrator to bring information in and out of Intacct. To import information into Intacct, we have imports and we use what's called a template, right? So we download it into Excel, we populate it. It's very easy to populate it. It gives you, date. So you put your date there, general ledger account, put your general ledger account there, and then we hit a button and it imports right in. So we can import journal entries using these templates right into Intacct. So if you have a file that you're getting from, say, your payroll processing company that gives you your payroll journal entry and you need to get that into Intacct, you can ask them to populate, to create their data so that it mirrors that template, and then you just copy it in, hit the button, and it goes. You don't have to create, like in Sage 100, you don't have to create a Visual Integrator job to read the file and then bring it in. It's very easy. You don't have to be a programmer to get an import into Intacct. You can do that in a general ledger. We can import AP bills. We can import invoices. We can import a whole bunch of stuff. Easy.
Easy, great. Another one came through. How does the payroll module compare to Sage 100?
So here's the deal with the payroll. I'm not going to lie to you. Sage Intacct does not process payroll natively inside the product. They don't. Sage Intacct as a company believes in best of breed, right? So they believe that they are the best financial accounting software programmers, not payroll. So we have in Intacct, we have what's called open APIs, which means that we can have people directly, we can have master developers directly interact with our software behind the scenes and bring data in without doing the import that I just talked about. So we do partner with a bunch of different payroll companies that do that. Or like I just said, you get the entry from your payroll processor and then you import it in. If you tag the dimension employee and you tag the dimension project, then we can, as the journal entry comes in, then it populates that data and we can run reports off of it. Like you just saw me looking at employees and stuff, we can still do that.
Okay, sounds good. Another one says, does DSD assist with the conversion from Sage 100 to Sage Intacct? And if so, what is the added cost for the conversion?
So that's my job, right? I am an implementer of Sage Intacct. And so if you're coming from 100 to Intacct, I'm going to speak for Sean and say that he's going to say that that's me. So
Yes.
what we do is Jim Woodhead, who's one of our colleagues and really, really smart, really, really experienced Sage 100%. Some of you may know him. He has written a tool that allows us to get your history out using crystal reports and user-defined tables where we put the mapping table in. And then we extract your historical data out. We run it against that mapping table that I was talking about before, and then we import it in to your general ledger so that for historical purposes, you have your data to report on. So that is something that we do. And it depends, the cost of it depends on how many years we're taking, how many entities you have, what your transactions are. I don't know, Sean, if you want to talk to that a little bit more.
No, I think you did an effective job covering it. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so what you're saying is, yes, DSD does it. We're actually one of the preferred partners in the Sage channel, and as Sean noted, we've been celebrated for our efforts, which extends beyond normal partners because we've developed these tools and things like that. So it's really exciting to be a DSD client, I think, and this is the future and what we want for a lot of our Sage clients. If it works for your business type, we really are encouraging this cloud because of all the reasons you've heard today. So if we don't have any further questions, I guess, Sean, would you like to close this out?
Yeah, really just wanted to thank all of you for joining us today. We hope that this was informative to you. We really appreciate the interaction with the questions, and certainly happy to answer any additional ones that you have coming up. And so we will make sure to reach out to you afterwards, just contact you, see if there's anything else we can do for you as you go through and evaluate whether or not Sage Intacct is a good fit for you. So wanted to thank you again for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks, everyone. One last question came through. Does DSD also provide the Sage Intacct training for employees?
Absolutely. We will train your employees, and we will also give you access to Sage Intacct's training site that has tons and tons of classes where you can learn even more about Sage Intacct. I have to say the training between Sage 100 and Sage Intacct is so much different. There's so much access to it. And it's on demand. So, if I have a half an hour and I want to sit and eat my sandwich and watch a training video, I can. There's a lot of access to training with Intacct.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.